There is a strange moment that almost everyone experiences at least once in life. A moment when something shifts behind the scenes, and you don't even know it has happened. No phone call, no announcement, no dramatic confrontation, just silence, and somewhere someone quietly walks away from another person because of something they discovered about you. Not because you asked them to, not because you convinced them, but because truth has a gravity that eventually pulls every illusion to the ground. We often imagine that love begins when two people meet, but perhaps real love begins much earlier. The moment someone starts seeing reality more clearly than fantasy, because every human being carries two stories. The story they tell the world, and the story that quietly reveals itself through their actions. The second story is always the honest one. Think about a forest after a storm. The storm does not create weak trees. It simply reveals which roots were already shallow. Relationships work the same way. Life never invents people's character. It only exposes it. There are people who will smile beside you, while secretly hoping you never realize your worth. There are people who call it love when it is actually possession. They call it concern when it is control. They call it protection when it is fear. And sometimes, someone who is meant to find you watches all of this from a distance. They notice something others ignored, not your perfection, your peace, not your appearance, your consistency, not how loudly you demand attention, but how quietly you remain yourself even when no one is watching. That kind of authenticity changes people. It becomes impossible to fake around someone who refuses to wear a mask. Because masks only survive where everyone agrees to keep pretending. Imagine holding a mirror. Most people think mirrors exist so we can admire ourselves. But mirrors have another purpose. They reveal what cannot be seen directly. Certain people enter our lives for exactly that reason. Not to complete us, but to reflect us. And reflection can be uncomfortable. Because when someone deeply genuine appears, everyone living through illusion begins to feel exposed. Sometimes your greatest influence has nothing to do with what you say. It is simply the way you exist. The way you refuse to betray your values for temporary approval. The way you walk away from disrespect without creating unnecessary drama. The way you remain kind without becoming weak. The way you forgive without forgetting your dignity. People notice these things, far more than you realize. Human beings constantly compare realities. They may never admit it, but every conversation, every relationship, every friendship quietly asks one invisible question. How do I feel when I am around this person? That question changes everything, because eventually someone realizes, I feel exhausted over here, and strangely peaceful over there. Peace is persuasive. More persuasive than charm, more persuasive than beauty, more persuasive than endless promises. The soul recognizes safety before the mind finds the words. That is why genuine connection often feels familiar instead of exciting. Not because it lacks passion, because it lacks confusion. Confusion has been romanticized for far too long. People mistake anxiety for chemistry, uncertainty for destiny, emotional highs and lows for deep love. Yet rivers make the loudest noise where they are shallow. The deepest waters move quietly. Perhaps healthy love feels less like fireworks, and more like finally putting down a heavy suitcase you forgot you were carrying. There is another uncomfortable truth. Sometimes people lose relationships, not because someone stole their partner, but because truth quietly removed the illusion that was holding everything together. No one can compete with authenticity forever. Performance always becomes exhausting. Eventually masks become heavier than honesty. The strange thing about becoming yourself is that it rearranges everyone around you. Some people become inspired, others become uncomfortable. Some move closer, others disappear without explanation. Neither response defines your worth. It only reveals where each person stands in relation to truth. A lighthouse never chases ships. It simply shines. Those seeking safety move toward it. Those comfortable drifting sail elsewhere. The lighthouse loses nothing by remaining itself. Neither do you. We spend years believing we must convince people to love us. Convince them we are enough. Convince them we deserve respect. But genuine connection begins the day convincing ends. When someone truly sees you, there is nothing left to perform, nothing left to negotiate, nothing left to prove, just presence. Presence is rare. Most people live either inside yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's fears. Very few stand fully inside this moment. Those who do become unforgettable. Not because they are extraordinary, because they are real. Reality carries a quiet power that illusion can never imitate. Think about sunlight entering an abandoned room. The dust was always there. The light did not create it. It simply made it visible. Sometimes your presence becomes that light in someone else's life. Suddenly they notice manipulation they once called affection, silence they once called peace, loneliness they once called independence, fear they once called loyalty. Awareness changes everything, and awareness has consequences. Not everyone welcomes awakening. Some people would rather protect a comfortable lie than embrace an uncomfortable truth. Others choose differently. They leave, quietly, without revenge, without spectacle. Because once your eyes adjust to daylight, darkness no longer feels like home. This is why personal growth often transforms relationships you never expected to change. You evolve, and suddenly conversations no longer fit. Old dynamics lose their power. People who depended on your self-doubt begin feeling strangely distant. Not because you became better than them, because you became more honest with yourself. Honesty changes the entire emotional climate around a person. The strongest people are rarely the loudest. They simply stop negotiating with what diminishes them. That quiet decision echoes farther than shouting ever could. There is immense dignity in becoming someone whose peace cannot be purchased by someone else's approval, because approval is temporary, identity is enduring. The world constantly invites you to become someone easier to control, someone who apologizes for existing, someone who shrinks to protect fragile egos, someone who abandons authenticity in exchange for acceptance. Yet every compromise leaves a small crack inside the soul. At first the crack seems insignificant. Then one day you wonder why you no longer recognize yourself. Self-betrayal rarely arrives dramatically. It arrives through tiny daily permissions.
The permission to stay silent when your heart wanted honesty. The permission to ignore your intuition. The permission to remain where your spirit quietly withered. Until eventually,
you forget what your own inner voice sounds like. Perhaps that is why authentic people are so magnetic. Not because they have discovered perfection, because they have stopped abandoning themselves. That courage gives others permission to do the same. And somewhere, someone watching your life realizes something profound. They understand that love built on fear will never survive. That relationships built on pretending eventually collapse beneath their own weight. That peace is more valuable than excitement without security. That respect is more romantic than obsession. That emotional safety is more attractive than emotional chaos. So they make a decision, a quiet one, invisible to almost everyone. They release someone who could never meet them where truth lives. Not because they found perfection, but because they finally recognized authenticity. And authenticity changes the standard forever. Here is the irony. You may never know that your quiet integrity became someone else's turning point. You may never hear the conversation, never witness the goodbye, never learn your influence. Because the deepest transformations often happen without witnesses. Seeds never announce the moment they begin growing beneath the earth. Yet, forests begin exactly that way. Never underestimate the invisible impact of becoming more fully yourself. Someone may find the courage to leave manipulation because they watched your boundaries. Someone may believe in kindness again because they experienced your honesty. Someone may stop settling because your life reminded them what emotional dignity feels like. The greatest legacy is not admiration. It is permission. Permission for another human being to believe that a healthier life is possible. And perhaps that is what soul-level connection has always meant. Not two perfect people destined by magic, but two people whose honesty becomes impossible to ignore. Two lives meeting after each has learned that love should never require the abandonment of the self, because the deepest form of love does not rescue you from who you are.
it returns you to who you have always been. And the moment someone recognizes that truth, every false relationship suddenly becomes too small to live inside.
There is something both unsettling and liberating about the way truth works. It does not usually arrive with loud announcements or dramatic confrontations. It moves quietly, almost invisibly, like the first light of dawn creeping through a dark room. At first, nothing appears different. The furniture remains where it was, the walls have not changed, and the silence is familiar. Yet as the light grows stronger, everything becomes clearer. Dust that was hidden suddenly appears. Corners once swallowed by darkness reveal their true shape. Truth does not create what was there. It simply makes it impossible to ignore. Relationships follow this same law. The truth rarely destroys something real. It only exposes what could never stand on a genuine foundation. Many people spend years believing that love alone is enough to keep two people together. But love without honesty becomes fragile. Affection without respect becomes exhausting. Attraction without trust slowly transforms into suspicion. From the outside, a relationship may appear strong, but appearances are often carefully constructed. Human beings are remarkably skilled at maintaining comforting illusions because illusions feel safer than uncertainty. We tell ourselves that things will improve, that difficult behavior is temporary, or that silence means peace instead of avoidance. These stories protect us from immediate pain, but they also postpone necessary growth. The challenge is that illusions always demand energy. Every lie requires another lie to protect it. Every ignored red flag asks for another excuse. Every compromise of personal values quietly weakens the structure of the relationship. Like a house built on unstable ground, it may remain standing for years, but every passing storm increases the strain beneath the surface. Eventually, it is not the storm that causes the collapse. The storm simply reveals what was already unstable from the beginning. This is why moments of truth often feel so shocking. One honest conversation, one unexpected discovery, or one act of genuine kindness from another person can suddenly illuminate everything that was previously overlooked. A person may realize they have been confusing control with care, dependency with devotion, or emotional chaos with passion. What once felt normal begins to feel unfamiliar. The heart starts asking questions that the mind has avoided for years. Once those questions are awakened, they refuse to disappear. Psychologically, this happens because human beings naturally seek consistency between what they believe and what they experience. When those two realities no longer match, discomfort grows. At first, many people resist that discomfort. They defend the familiar because familiarity feels safe, even when it is painful. But truth has remarkable patience. It waits quietly beneath every conversation, every disappointment, and every moment of reflection. Over time, pretending becomes heavier than accepting reality. One of the greatest misunderstandings about relationships is the belief that they end because someone stronger, smarter, or more attractive appears. More often, relationships end because authenticity enters the picture. When someone experiences genuine respect, emotional safety, or honest communication, they suddenly recognize what has been missing all along. The comparison is not between two people. It is between illusion and reality. Once someone has truly experienced emotional clarity, returning to confusion becomes increasingly difficult. The remarkable thing about truth is that it asks for courage from everyone involved. It asks one person to stop pretending they are fulfilled when they are not. It asks another to accept responsibility instead of creating excuses. It asks both individuals to choose honesty over comfort. Sometimes that honesty leads to healing and deeper connection. Other times it leads to separate paths. Neither outcome is a failure. A relationship that survives truth becomes stronger because it is built on reality. A relationship that cannot survive truth was already being held together by illusion. There is a quiet wisdom in accepting this. We often fear truth because we imagine it will take something valuable away from us. Yet truth does not steal what is real. It protects what deserves to last. It removes the masks, the performances, and the stories we created to avoid discomfort, leaving behind only what can endure. While that process may be painful, it is also deeply compassionate. It clears away what no longer serves the soul, creating space for relationships rooted not in fear, habit, or appearance, but in honesty, respect, and genuine human connection. Authenticity is one of the rarest qualities a human being can possess, because it requires something that cannot be borrowed, purchased, or performed. It asks a person to stand in the world without hiding behind carefully crafted identities or the endless desire to be accepted. Most of us spend a significant part of our lives trying to become who we think others will admire. We learn which emotions are considered acceptable, which opinions are rewarded, and which parts of ourselves should remain hidden. Slowly, without realizing it, we begin to confuse acceptance with belonging. We wear different masks for different people until the masks become so familiar that we forget what our own face feels like. Perfection is often the greatest disguise of all. It promises admiration but demands constant performance in return. A person chasing perfection lives with an invisible fear that one mistake, one weakness, or one honest confession will cause everything they have built to collapse. This creates a quiet exhaustion. Every conversation becomes a performance. Every success feels temporary. Every compliment creates pressure to maintain an impossible standard. Instead of experiencing connection, they experience evaluation. Instead of feeling seen, they feel observed. The world applauds the image while the real person quietly wonders whether anyone would stay if the mask ever came off. Authenticity moves in the opposite direction. It does not seek to impress. It seeks to express. It allows imperfections to exist without allowing them to define one's worth. An authentic person understands that strength is not the absence of vulnerability, but the willingness to remain honest even when honesty